All right, you guys, we are here with Payson. We are super excited. We're gonna, and apologize for our listeners. My voice, I'm on day 2 of COVID right now, but I'm functioning. So we're gonna get through this. Payson, thank you so much for joining us. We're so excited to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really excited too. This will be
We're
fun.
gonna we're gonna dive into all things nutrition. But as our listeners know, we are we're at the bit here waiting for Payson's two truths and a lie because we just watched him draft them up before we hit record here. So we are excited to see what he just came up with on the spot.
Yeah. So should we dive into that right now?
Let's go for it.
Okay. Um, what should we do first? Okay. I've raced all 5 collegiate bike disciplines. So that would be mountain bike, road, track, BMX, and cyclocross.
Oh, okay.
Um, Raced all the national championships in those.
Okay.
I play or have played both saxophone and viola. Um, I'd never been bike packing in my whole life before trying to set the Colorado Trail fastest known time.
Mm, okay.
Hmm. Those are really good.
I don't know why, but I have a hard time seeing you on a BMX bike. Picturing you on a BMX bike. I feel like I am like tempted to say that one's the lie.
I was kind of going with that too. Maybe it's like
Yeah.
4 out of 5, or like 3 out of 5.
I actually don't even know if BMX is a collegiate bike discipline either, too. Is it? If it is, I had no
It
idea.
is, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, that's good to
Hmm.
know. I'm gonna lean with that one. I think Amanda, you're on the same page.
I think so. I feel like the other
Okay.
2 are interesting enough that
Yeah,
maybe true.
I feel like you could be, um, yeah, play music. Okay, but don't tell us the answer. We will have some stories to reveal, hopefully, for our listeners at the end, or we might reveal some truths to some of these things potentially as we learn a little bit more about you. But
Sounds good.
yes, so born in Texas.
Hmm. Yeah, small town outside of Austin, about 20 minutes outside of Austin, called Dripping Springs.
Oh, wow.
Good country Texas name, I feel
Yeah.
like, for a small town. Not so small anymore, but yeah, had a really kind of special countryside, quiet upbringing, I guess, that I'm very grateful for in hindsight.
That's awesome. And
Yeah.
through your upbringing, what got you excited to get on a bike?
Um, well, actually, this kind of maybe plays into the two truths and a lie a little bit. Growing up, 2 things. So Lance was winning the tours, his streak of 7 tours during that time, and was a local Austin guy and actually had a big ranch really close to where I grew up.
Mm.
Um, and also Austin has quite a big BMX scene. And so
Oh,
it's sort of opposite ends of the spectrum, but I was really obviously engaged with following the Tour de France as a kiddo, and then also kind of dabbling with some BMX stuff in the yard. Nothing too serious, but building sketchy jumps in the
okay.
yard. And I mean, I played more traditional sports through middle school and high school. Ran track and field, played basketball, all that sort of thing.
Nice.
But had this recurring knee injury that kind of gradually coaxed me towards bike riding more, just
Mm.
because it's easier on joints, obviously.
Yeah.
And my dad was an avid, recreational mountain biker. So we'd
Nice.
do that together on the weekends. And Texas actually has a really awesome kind of statewide racing series. So I
Mm.
started doing that here and there in high school, and just eventually totally fell in love, and for whatever reason had a really good work ethic for it.
Awesome.
And I guess haven't looked back since.
That's great. So your high school had a mountain bike team?
No, well, it did right after
Oh,
I left.
Yeah.
But I graduated high school just shortly before NICA really took off. So I just
Okay.
barely missed that boat.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. That's very similar to what happened to at my high school as well. I think it was just starting when I was a senior, and there was only one female on the team, and I was like
Mhm.
terrified to
Yeah.
looking back now, I was like, I wish I had done it, but it's oh well. So with the cycling, going from some mountain bike stuff, is there a certain point through that journey where you were entering into some races where you're like, oh, I'm pretty decent at this, or maybe I'm really good at this, or did that ever click and just kind of kept pushing for a little bit more, a little bit faster?
Yeah, I mean, for whatever reason, it was the training that I really fell in love with quickly,
Yeah.
which is super strange for, a 14 or 15-year-old, I feel like, because especially coming from more team sports, I really enjoyed playing basketball, running track and field, that sort of thing. But I never really had that extra work ethic for it that some of my peers did. I had a
Mhm.
lot of friends on the basketball team, for example, that would, during summer when school was out, they would go do these shooting camps and these skills camps and these extra things. And I just never really had an interest in that.
Yeah.
And I don't really know why, but when I did my first mountain bike race, I didn't do great. It was a humbling experience, but my response immediately was, I want to get better at this and I want to work at it. And to this day, I have no idea why, but I just had this crazy work ethic from a really young age and would just go out, after school in the sweltering Texas heat and just do these crazy interval sessions by myself, day after
Wow.
day, just dreaming big. And the payoff of seeing improvement and just that process was uh, really exciting and just gave me a huge amount of direction. And I was just kind of immediately into the deep end, just super, super focused, kind of training almost like a professional by like 16 years old.
Oh my gosh. Wow. And
Yeah.
did you have a coach programming for you, or were you scouring the internet for training plans, or?
Yeah. So at first, my dad and I would kind of do some research in books and on the
Mhm.
internet a little bit. And then I got a coach when I was 15.
Wow.
And I actually worked with that coach up until last year. So for 14
Wow.
years.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
That's great.
So yeah, it was just kind of an incremental process. And yeah, I just was super committed from the start for whatever reason.
Wow, that's
Mhm.
amazing. And so after high school, what did this might reveal one of those truths or lies, but what happened after high school with the cycling career and events?
Yeah, so I had some opportunities while I was still in high school to race with the national team over in
Mm,
Europe.
wow.
And I was always kind of it felt like a little bit of a, I don't know about like a Cinderella story, but I felt like I was really having to earn it extra because I was going up against these kids that were from mountainous regions, whether it's here in Durango in Colorado or California. The other US junior racers that I would be racing on the kind of the national level races or the national championships just had this incredible climbing ability and
Yeah.
really impressive technical skills and stuff that I just hadn't really developed
Hmm.
in the terrain where I grew up. And I didn't really have too many training partners. And I would see, like Durango Devo come out with 100 kids to the national championships. And I just thought, oh, that's so cool. And so when I had the opportunity to join the national team, I think when I was 17 and go over to Germany and Switzerland to do a bit of racing, I really jumped at the opportunity just because I knew I had a lot of weaknesses to make up if I really wanted to do it professionally.
Yeah.
And that was a really eye-opening experience and very humbling. Um, but our coach over there was this guy named Matt Shriver, who was the Fort Lewis College coach in Durango.
Mm.
Um, and he was very convincing. And I think of the six athletes that were on that trip, three of us ended up going to Fort Lewis College 2 years later.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, in large part just because of his, you know, recruiting, I guess, or,
Yes.
or encouragement.
Hmm.
Um, and it was one of the best things that I could have done, I think, for my development. Moving to Durango for sure was one component, but also just collegiate cycling is such an amazing opportunity to kind of diversify your skill sets and exposures to different kinds of racing. So I got to dive into all different kinds of racing and disciplines, and it just really it helped me become more rounded and kind of shore up some of those weaknesses. And eventually, I was able to continue progressing towards getting to do it full time.
Nice. And of the different disciplines, did you have a kind of a favorite or one that was the most challenging to you?
I mean, certainly mountain biking, just because it's what my main discipline was early on, but I really enjoyed the tactics of road racing. The team time trial is a big component of collegiate cycling, and I really enjoyed the camaraderie, and kind of, it was sort of like full circle. It went back to kind of my basketball days where it was more of a team sport. So it was fun to do that. I'd say track was the most challenging, just because it was the most different compared to what I was used to. Training for 1 minute efforts was very different than training for a 2 hour mountain bike race or 4 hour road race.
Right.
But yeah, it was great. I really look back on it with a lot of fondness, for sure.
That's awesome. And in all these different disciplines, are these happening at different times of the year or through your season, or are these overlapping? Are you trying to improve in a 1 minute sprint time while you're also training for something that's going to be a 2 hour duration?
Yeah, good question. So looking back on it, it was just kind of a crazy amount of racing, because along with doing collegiate racing, I was racing with this U25 kind of professional development team in Durango, where we had professional level support. We weren't getting paid a livable wage per se, but we had incredible support to go to all the big mountain bike races throughout the summer. And then kind of leading into that season, so February, March, April, I would be doing collegiate road. And then in the fall, I would kind of extend my season and do some of the other disciplines that happen in the fall. So it almost became like a year-round thing, which, as a 19, 20, 21-year-old, I could manage. And I had so much excitement for it that I think it was good to just kind of do some of everything then.
Yeah.
But there was one year when I tried to combine, I was starting to really take an interest in the longer distance mountain bike stuff, the marathon stuff. And I remember for like a month straight, I was alternating like 5 hour mountain bike races and 1 minute like kilo TTs on the
Oh my
track.
gosh.
And in
Wow.
hindsight, it was just ridiculous. Like there's no way
Yes.
that I could be my best at both, but it was kind of a fun period where I was just kind of trying everything.
Goodness. Yes. Yeah. Testing your body and
Mhm.
all your training, I'm sure.
Mhm.
So, with those different sports and when you were in college, out of curiosity, was there ever conversations about sports nutrition at the time or
Yeah,
hydration?
for sure. For sure. We
Awesome.
actually, she's still there at Fort Lewis at the cycling team, but her name's Elka Britzart, and she was a really high level World Cup downhill racer. Actually, she
Oh,
finished.
awesome.
She was I think she won the silver medal at Downhill Worlds one year,
Wow.
but had an awesome DH career, and also kind of transitioned into being kind of an all-encompassing like performance mastermind. So she did a lot of physical therapy stuff, nutrition stuff, strength and conditioning stuff.
Amazing.
It was just a huge resource to the team. So she would kind of send out these I think it was weekly, just sort of like, sometimes they were short little paragraph long bits of information. Sometimes there were these huge, 2,000 word downloads on things to think about nutrition wise. So that was definitely a cool asset during that time.
That's great. And through your cycling, even to this day, if there's anything, but was there ever a turning point or something that you noticed nutritionally where you kind of like light bulb on, where it was like, if I do this with nutrition, I either don't perform well or I do perform that much better? Did you ever notice anything like that through your cycling career?
The biggest I guess the biggest turning points for me nutrition wise have mostly been around uh the timing of nutrition, and then on bike fueling.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm someone that really enjoys this is going to sound kind of vague, but I just really enjoy traveling and like exploring the world and that sort of thing. So I eat pretty diversely. I really like, so for example, this past week we were on vacation in Jamaica and they had some pretty interesting, traditional meals that were a little out of my comfort zone, but I was like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
here, got to try it. So whenever I'm traveling, I try to do that. Um, I'm not someone that has really micromanaged my diet from a performance standpoint as much, but
Mm-hmm.
there are some basic things that I definitely pay attention to, especially increasingly so as our racing here in the States gets more and more competitive. Like I think everyone
Yeah.
is starting to look for those marginal gains more. So
Mm-hmm.
every year I pay attention to it a little bit more, but I definitely try to balance that with, experiencing the world and trying new foods and really enjoying food also.
That's great. That is great. And with the talking about timing of fueling and that kind of stuff, the FKT,
Mm.
can you tell us a little bit about that experience? What made you want to do that? When was that? What was the distance? Can you share that with our listeners?
The one I mentioned in the Two Truths and a Lie, or because I've done
So,
a good handful.
is it the Trail Town one?
Oh, so
Yeah.
well, that wasn't really fastest known time. So
Okay.
I kind of have like historically, I've sort of done some where I'm trying to set records, and then I'll
Hmm.
also come up with just these crazy ideas of is this possible type thing. So it's less about setting a record and it's more like a personal challenge. So
Nice.
the one in Bentonville was more of a personal challenge where I just wanted to
Okay.
see if I could ride all of their trails in a day.
Fun.
And then this past year, I did one where I wanted to try to ride from coast across Tasmania. So those
Wow.
are more just like personal challenges. And then there's more that have been like actual record attempts where it's something like the White Rim in
Mm,
Moab or Colorado Trail or,
mm.
things like that.
Okay. So what was your first attempt at FKT?
That would have been the White Rim. Yeah,
And
in
what
Moab.
was your thought around nutrition prep going into that?
This is actually a good one for nutrition. So with these fastest known times, most of the time traditionally they're self-supported. So you start with everything you need, clip in and go, and you don't have any crew out there providing nutritional support. So there's this fine line between optimizing speed and efficiency and weight, not carrying more than you need,
Yeah.
and then also making sure that you don't run out of fuel.
Hmm.
So for the White Rim, the first time, I still don't really know why I did it this way, but in hindsight, it was so sketchy. It's a 102-mile lap in Canyonlands National Park in one of the most beautiful deserts in the world, just crazy red rock.
Hmm.
Pretty rugged. And the record at that point was just under 6 hours.
Okay.
And on paper, I had a feeling I could do it in like 5:45 or so. And so this was like right before the whole um, carbohydrate grams per hour inflection point really happened. It was maybe just happening, but it wasn't quite on my radar yet. So I think I was
Yeah.
probably doing at most like 50 to 60 grams of carbs per hour, which
Okay.
is way less than I would do now. So that was kind of
Yeah.
part one. Part two is I did the thing on 50, let's see, 52 ounces of fluid. So 2 bottles.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Do you remember what the temperature was like when you did it too?
It was pretty cool,
Okay,
which was
good.
one of the reasons that I did that. But the main
Yeah.
thing is the route has this kind of interesting aspect where it's sort of flat for 20 miles on top, and then you descend down into this lower area, and it has these climbs, but it rolls mostly, nothing crazy. And then you climb out, and it's
Mm.
like a 2,500-foot climb,
Oh,
basically right at the end.
oh
And
gosh.
so the idea was, take enough fluids for the first 4.5 hours, right to the base of that climb, and then
Mm.
just basically be super light for the climb
Yeah.
up, and definitely you're going to get dehydrated, but the idea is you're getting dehydrated to a point where your performance is going to suffer like right as you're finishing. That was the idea.
It's the hope.
Um,
Yeah.
I came up way short fluids wise, and
Yeah.
there's this pretty gnarly photo of me at the finish with a gallon jug of water, and I drank the entire gallon jug in 5 minutes.
Oh my
Um,
goodness.
and my heart
Wow.
rate was doing all this wild stuff, and like it was sketchy. Very big
Wow.
lesson.
Yes.
So
Goodness.
not my
Wow.
greatest moment.
Yeah. So do you recall what your time ended up being?
Yeah, it was 5:45.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
Amazing. There you
and then I
go.
went back and did it again in about 5.5 hours, with
Wow.
3 bottles, which was still kind of on the lower side, but it ended up actually being pretty perfect for that
Wow.
tactic that I was going
And
for originally.
do you remember what fueling products you were using at the time, or
Oof.
was fuel in the bottle a thing then?
Fuel in the bottle wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
Um, Trying to remember. I mean, it would have been a lot of gels, and I think I took like 2 Cliff Bar style bars, but I don't remember which bars they actually were.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
with your evolution now, what is, tell the listeners, like, what is, most of them probably know when they're listening to this and see your name on the headline, right? But what is your cycling primary sport now that you do?
Um, the majority of my year is taken up by the gravel racing scene, and really the Lifetime Grand Prix. So it's a 7 round series that runs from April through October.
Mm-hmm.
3 mountain bike races, 4 gravel races. So basically off-road endurance racing. 2 hours to 10 hours for Unbound.
Yeah.
Um, and I also have this continued side interest in kind of these ultra distance challenges. So another interesting, just quick, like nutrition intensive challenge that I did was I rode from coast to coast across Iceland.
Oh,
And
wow.
that one is super, super remote. There's absolutely nothing in the interior highlands of Iceland, like not even a little outpost that you have a spigot at. So I had to carry everything from coast to coast.
Wow.
And so that was a really fun challenge. A few years on from the White Rim debacle learning experience, and trying to figure out how to calculate, like when you have no idea how long it's going to take, how much fueling do you take, assuming that it's going to be a minimum 12 hours, how do you pack all that on your bike? So
Right.
along with the racing, I really enjoy those kind of more like exploratory ultra distance missions as well.
Well, that's fun. And so thinking about the white rim situation, how has nutrition changed today?
Way more carbs per hour. It's kind of funny to think back on, the little like fat adapted phase that we had a handful of years ago, where everyone's like, can you bike race effectively being a fat adapted sort of athlete? And
Mhm.
it's just wild when you compare that to how things are now, where it's
Yeah.
literally like, can you eat 100 grams of carbs an hour, 140? Because there are people out there that are really pushing the
Yeah.
limits of that. So
Yeah.
just tons of carbs is really the big advancement, I would say.
Yeah. And what are your go-to fueling products, or do those vary between the different durations that you're racing?
I'm kind of all over the map. So
Mm,
I use goo products a
mhm,
lot. I really like their goo Roctane
mhm.
mix, which has about 60 grams of carbs per bottle.
Oh, wow.
For me, some of the higher carb drink mixes, the like really high carb ones, I kind of have to be careful with them because I don't feel like they hydrate me quite as
Right.
well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I also love the Morton gels. Their bars are good. I love JoJ bars.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Um, the SIS chews are really good. Some of their products, the Science and Sport products, are really good.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm kind of all over the place for a lot of these races, especially something like Unbound. Diversity can be pretty key for
Yeah.
me, because you're having to just shove so much food in your mouth that changing it up a little bit goes a long way.
Yeah. Avoid the flavor fatigue.
Exactly. Exactly.
With talking about Unbound, with this last year's race conditions, what was what was your mindset when you hit the mud? I
Oh,
have to
I
know.
was so stoked.
Did
I love
you
that stuff.
did you
Yeah.
pedal through, or did you throw your bike on your back and start running, or what, what did you do? What was your approach?
There are a couple points where I had to hop off and run, but coming from a mountain bike background, I just really loved that opportunity we had, and just being able to kind of creatively come up with different lines. And when you're out there, it really is kind of a blank canvas.
Hmm.
There's the road, but you have a ditch on either side with some grass, and then maybe kind of an embankment that you can ride up along the edge of. So I personally loved it. I would love it if there was more of that every year. I know a
Yeah,
lot of people weren't too thrilled with it, but
yeah,
I love it when conditions get crazy like that.
yeah. It seemed like there was a little bit of everything. I think, well, depending on how long you were out on course, I heard there was like hail and
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe some lightning, wind, all the good things, and high heat at some point too. So
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
a little bit of everything. So
Mm-hmm.
with something like Unbound, a much longer duration versus maybe you said the shortest is about 2 hours. What is the nutrition? What does your breakfast look like? And is it different for those two different types of events?
It actually isn't really different. Kind of a funny variable with all this is sleep, actually. So with something like Unbound or Leadville, the starts are so early that we're waking up at 4 a.m. or even 3:30 to get food down and give your body some time to start digesting it a little bit.
Hmm.
So with something like Unbound, I actually, the temptation is there to have two breakfasts or just really try to, get as much carb and calorie down as you can. But with, pre-race butterflies and the likelihood that you didn't sleep much, if at all, the night before, I've definitely made the mistake of just trying to get too much food in
Mm,
before something like Unbound or Leadville. So I've ended up pretty much doing the same thing
yeah.
pre-race, which is 2 or 3 packets of oatmeal, instant oatmeal,
Hmm.
and then just a spoonful of almond butter or peanut butter, some maple syrup,
Nice.
and some like raspberries and blueberries.
Awesome. The instant oatmeal is easy and transportable too for all the different events and the different locations, which is nice. It's hard to have a breakfast that you have to change and adapt at every place, So
For
having
sure.
something that you can I always prep my clients with that. They like can't
Mm-hmm.
have their specific Dave's Killer bagel at it's hard to find at every spot sometimes. So
It's true.
yes,
It's
the
true.
the oatmeal you can throw it in your suitcase, no problem. Or
Mm-hmm.
van, however you're getting there.
Yeah.
And then what about we're talking a lot about carbs, but what are your thoughts or approach on any sort of carb loading or glycogen supercompensation in the days leading up?
Yeah, so this is something that I didn't pay as much attention to up until the last couple of years when I
Mm,
started focusing on it a little bit more. Um, but yeah, from pretty much 3 days out, I start carb loading and kind of tapering fiber as well. And honestly, the diet gets really boring. It's like just a lot of rice and chicken or fish, whole wheat bread. I try to, if there's an opportunity to get carbs somehow, like I'll just take it.
yeah.
And trying to keep it somewhat diverse up until like the day before, and then just staying with what I know works.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, just not really being shy about having two dinners or, two lunches or whatever it is. Just kind of consistently getting as much carbs in as possible.
Yeah. I think that's smart. Do you, with the carb loading, ever feel? I think one of the things we hear from our clients who are new to carb loading is this fear of um, like the number on the scale going up or
Mm.
water retention. Is
Hmm.
that something you experience at all, or did you not think about it?
You know what's funny is my weight fluctuates so little.
Mm,
It's this might even sound kind of weird, but this off season, like I really tried to just kind of binge and just really treat myself because our
yeah.
our off seasons are so short.
Mm.
For me, it's 3 weeks off the
Oh my
bike.
gosh.
Yeah. And so, I drank a bunch of alcohol. I just ate whatever I wanted, whenever I
Yes.
wanted. Um, and I think I gained like 6 pounds. And between, in regards to your question about water retention and that sort of thing, like, I mean, I see weight fluctuations of like 2 to 3 pounds at most during the season. So I don't worry about it too much. And then the other thing is these races are just so unbelievably hard on your body that where I do see a big weight swing actually is from the start of a race or before a race to after a race, even during a hard training session. I might head out the door and be 150, 151 pounds. And when I come back in the door, I'm like 145, 146 over the course of just 5 or 6 hours. And with how lean we are already, like I think you can worry about it too much. And there's also some interesting software out there now in terms of just how much different, like down to the second, you can plug in a GPX file and basically run a simulation and see how much 1 extra pound is actually costing you. And it's
interesting.
We're learning that like what tires you're running and rolling resistance, or whether you have an aero helmet on and a skin suit, makes a way bigger difference than an extra pound or two. So I've started to worry about it a little bit less.
That's good. I think that's smart. I think, if we can get more fuel stocked away essentially to deplete or decrease that rate of depletion when you're out there,
for sure,
see people be able to go a bit farther for longer. So goodness. And talking about carbs too, you mentioned 50 grams back in the day per hour. What are you shooting for nowadays?
It's funny because I sort of, my rule of thumb is I'll take enough for 120 grams an hour. And I'll just do the best I can with it. So it really depends. I found that there's so many factors like temperature, the way the race is playing out, the nature of the course. For example, last month we had a mountain bike race that was 4.5 hours, and probably 4 hours and 15 minutes of it was on tight, twisty trail. And so just the actual eating itself was a huge challenge, just actually getting the food in your body. So I plan for best case scenario and then probably end up eating more like 100 grams an hour typically when it's all said and done.
And you bring up a great point there. Packing your nutrition or hydration is one piece, but getting it in your body is another piece of the puzzle. Do you have any transportation or hand to mouth like tips or tricks that you utilize that help you?
I think carbs in the bottle has been a huge game changer for everybody, because when those really dynamic points are happening in a race, it's just such an easy way to get carbs in. So say there's a 20-minute period where there's a bunch of attacks going and you just can't take the time to unwrap something. Just being able to rely on a bottle during those times is really good. Similar sort of thing if a course has a really technical section for a while, you can rely on the bottle. I mean, there's all kinds of little things I've picked up over the years, like just the way I organize my jersey pockets. Having like a trash pocket in the middle and a certain kind of, like, I'll have gels in one side and chews in the other. So I just always know, depending on what I feel like I need, I just always know immediately where to go for it instead of fiddling around. And then, for the longer races, sometimes I'll put a little top tube bag on or wear bib shorts that have little mesh pockets on the sides, just to stuff used wrappers there. Organization goes a long way. It sounds funny and like OCD, but it can make all the difference when you're busy, trying not to crash.
Yes. Yeah. 100%. Was it Hannah Shell we had on recently, and she was talking about her Excel spreadsheet she gives to her like aid station crew of like, if this is going on, do this, if this is going on, do this.
Wow.
So
yeah, that's next level.
Yeah. I think she's a project manager too in her like day-to-day job. So I think it transfers over there for her. But the organization is key to stay on top of things and make sure, you're, whether it's caffeine timing or fuel and hydration, all that stuff makes sense. So let's see, you had a bike crash this year, right? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's
He
actually
wasn't.
it's been 2 years in a row of pretty violent crashes actually.
Oh
Last year,
no.
yeah, in 2022, I started my year with a really hard crash in the first race,
Oh shoot.
which gave me a broken collarbone and broken hand.
Ah,
Um, and then this year in early May, in my last tune-up race before Unbound, we were in the last 3 miles of the race, and the final selection had just happened. There was three of us that had just gotten away, and we're kind of battling for the win. And I actually don't know what happened because I crashed hard enough that I hit my head really hard and
oh gosh.
have probably like close to an hour that I don't remember.
Oh no.
Yeah, and I woke up in an ambulance and went through the whole like, concussion protocol thing, which was a new experience for me. I've crashed on my head before and like been shaken up, but not out cold like that.
Right.
Um, so it was scary and a reminder of speed and
Yes.
doing your best to take care of yourself and all that sort of thing.
Yes. And wear
Um,
helmets. Keep the
oh, no
helmets on.
kidding. Yeah,
Yeah.
really grateful for the helmet. Really grateful
Yes.
for the helmet. Mhm.
And so with the injury, concussion, all that stuff, how did you what does concussion protocol look like for you? What is that recovery process like, whether it's from goodness, or just a resting perspective, but also is there anything you changed nutritionally or supplementally during that time?
I can't remember that we changed anything nutritionally or supplement wise. And that probably could have been another step that we took for sure. But it's kind of like any other injury, but just ratcheted up. So whatever normal protocol you might follow for a broken bone or whatever, which is generally speaking just rest, like take it easy on yourself, sleep a lot, all
Yeah.
that sort of thing. Um, the same goes for concussion recovery, but just even more extreme. So um, sleeping as much as I could, completely staying off of devices, so
Yeah.
no screen time, basically just trying to let the brain rest, so as little stimulation as possible. And that even went as far as like avoiding bright sunlight, as depressing as
Mm-hmm.
that sounds. So kind of keeping the room a little bit, not super pitch black. The old protocol was like lay in bed, keep it pitch black.
Mm,
That's not evidently the move anymore,
yeah.
but just kind of keeping it darker. um, and the biggest symptom that really kept recurring for me was I would just get these massive waves of huge exhaustion where it was like I need to go sleep right now.
Oh
um,
wow.
and so just listening to that, going to
Yeah.
bed and just laying down for a few hours.
Goodness. Yeah. I think that's helpful to know too for our listeners, I think, to pay attention to that. We've had plenty of athletes take a spill, and
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes the concussion stuff, it's not always taken seriously sometimes, I
Yeah.
think, or approached properly. So yeah, I think I'm glad do you still notice any of that, or do you feel like you're recovered at this point?
I feel like I'm fully recovered, but there were definitely some lingering things that in hindsight, um, I I sort of like concussions are so hard because it's like it's not a broken bone, it's not an
Yeah.
injury you can see, and there's so little we know about the brain, period, but
Yeah.
especially brain injuries. So one of the kind of scariest lingering symptoms was just this so I'm innately a super super optimistic person, and that wasn't the case for months
Oh
afterward. I
shoot.
just found
Yeah.
myself kind of slipping in and out of pretty legitimate depression,
Mm,
and I thought that it was mostly just a result of kind of the struggles of coming back from the injury and struggling to find my form and just having some ups and downs with racing. I thought that was just affecting
yeah.
my mental health, because that's a pretty normal thing for an athlete too.
Yeah.
But what I wasn't having was like these uh having the normal conviction to have a failure, have a setback, and attack it and fix it and get
Yeah.
better and improve upon it. I would just sort of kind of dwell on it in a weird way,
Mm,
which is not typical for me.
yeah. Yeah.
So in hindsight, that was pretty rough. It actually lingered for quite a bit longer than I guess we expected.
Yeah.
Uh, But
That's really
as of
fascinating that you
yeah,
bring
as
that
of
up.
probably like September, it probably felt like I was kind of getting out of that phase.
Yeah, well, it's good. I think now that you say that, it makes me think of a couple situations too that, I mean, they're looking, I think, into like football players, right? And concussion and after effects of concussion. But most recently too, I heard my husband's part of their health and wellness of their fire union. And at their fire conferences, they're looking at the same thing, concussions and firefighters and like depression risk after the
Oh
fact.
wow.
So it's definitely something that, yeah, we're starting to dig into a little bit deeper and acknowledge that, and hopefully find some good solutions moving forward. Because I mean, concussions aren't hard to get. So,
No, it's true. Yeah, there's a bunch
yeah,
of different ways to do it.
yes, yeah,
For sure.
exactly. Goodness. Okay, well, I do want to be mindful of your time. So I'd love to dive into some of our listener questions, and then we'll tie up with our two truths and a lie here. So let's see. First question, kind of we maybe answered a little bit of this, but it says, how often do you experiment with different ride foods?
Um, I used to more. I would say year before last, so 2021. I experimented a lot because I was educating myself more about performance nutrition and also focusing more on these longer distance races.
Yeah.
So I did a lot of experimenting then, even experimented with ketones a little bit and
Oh
stuff like
yeah.
that. Um, so I was just kind of trying everything. I was trying, really traditional like ride food, and then more stuff that I would make like rice cakes and that sort of thing. At this point, I have a pretty good idea of what works well for me.
Mhm.
And so I'm not experimenting as much these days.
Nice. I know there's so much sports nutrition products constantly coming
I
out too,
know.
and so many different types of ketones now even, and yeah, stuff's all over the place.
Hmm. Hmm.
What was your experience with ketones out of curiosity? Do you
Yeah, to
feel
be
like
totally
they
honest, I didn't notice much of an effect. I tried it on 3 different training rides, and on the third training ride, I had like an insanely good day.
mm,
One of those days where it just like no matter what I did, I just couldn't get myself tired. It was like one of my
oh
last unbound training sessions, and
yeah,
I did the 7 hour training ride with like motor pacing and intervals at the end and finished still feeling amazing.
awesome.
So like, maybe, was that the ketones? And
Right.
it it's so hard to say. And I've had plenty of training sessions like that without using ketones. So
Mhm.
1 out of 3 experiences like that wasn't enough to convince me that it was something that I wanted to commit to.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's
Oh
also, obviously some question marks about health effects, and there's just a lot we don't know. And for
yeah.
me at this point, it just I decided not to go that route.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's still, like you're saying, a lot of question marks out there on it for the
Hmm.
endurance athlete population for sure.
Yeah.
Let's see. Next question here says, how do you give back to your cycling community?
I like that question. Um, well, there, the reason I'm pausing is because it totally depends. Like there's lots of different ways that I try to stay engaged. There's
Yeah.
very basic things like, so one thing that I kind of regret is how much I travel, and
Mm.
I wish I had more time to, for example, volunteer trail work days
Oh,
in
yeah.
here in Durango. We have an incredible trail network that requires maintenance, and I find the time maybe once every other year to
Yeah.
volunteer some work. Um, but in lieu of that, I'm always sure to donate.
That's great.
More regularly, I'd say just the podcast we do is
Yeah.
something that's just really consistent effort to try to elevate others and
Definitely.
educate, and give folks a platform. And it's just something I really enjoy. So it's a ton of work, but I'm really committed to it just because it's fun.
Yeah.
And I get a lot out of it, and it seems like other people get a lot out of it too. My partner Nicole has a cancer diagnostics nonprofit
Oh, wow.
that's doing really incredible work, and so I do my best to support her on the back end there.
Amazing.
Um, And then more community oriented. We have lots of junior racers here in the Durango area, and whenever I have an opportunity to, donate some equipment, or, I have a race wheel set that I'm not going to use, rather than, selling it and making, some extra cash at the end of the year, I try to donate that stuff to an up and coming racer now and then. So just stuff like that.
Yeah.
More than anything, it's just like keeping it front of mind, and whenever the opportunity presents itself, like actually taking the opportunity to support others. Because looking back on my own trajectory, like it is pretty mind-boggling if you go through chronologically all of the different people that played a role in your success.
Yeah.
And so I just try to remember that and pay it forward.
That's awesome. Yeah. And for our listeners, what's the name of your podcast?
It's called The Adventure Stache,
Yes.
Stache.
What are you going to do if you ever shave your mustache?
So funny story, when we were on vacation last weekend, we were doing a lot of snorkeling, and finally found something about the stash that's really annoying, which is that the snorkel wouldn't seal very well. And so I was getting water in my mask, and I was like, Nicole, what if I just like shaved it? Like, it's off season, it'll grow back by the time anyone notices. And she was like, are you kidding me? So so didn't do that. But I don't know. It's funny. I forget I have it. It's silly. It's fun.
Yeah.
It helps, people get a kick out of it. So
Yeah.
it's around for a while at this point.
Yeah. Did you ever see that video that was going around where the dad like shaved his mustache and like dropped the towel and showed the kid, and the kid was like started crying because it never seen its dad without a mustache. So
yeah, that actually happened with my dad. He had a beard up until just a couple of years ago.
Oh wow.
And for whatever reason, he just decided to shave. He shaved his face into a mustache too, a couple of years ago. And the craziest thing is his skin, where he'd had a beard for 40 some odd years, was so healthy, because it had been protected by the sun.
Yes.
Protected from the sun for 40 years. It was crazy. Like,
yeah.
dang, you have the best skin ever. It
Baby's
was really
bottom
funny.
skin.
Yeah, exactly.
That's great. Sun protection. Okay, next question we have here is your favorite meal and favorite candy to use for training.
Ooh, good questions. Favorite meal. I don't know if this is a cop-out answer, but I love any meal that is local to wherever we are and is maybe kind of traditional. So, if we're visiting some seaside area, just some sort of traditional, really fresh seafood dish is definitely what I'm always going to go for. I just love traveling and learning about places, and food and food culture is an amazing window into the travel experience. So I eat almost anything. I love all food.
Awesome.
I don't have any food allergies. I don't really have any food I don't like. So
that's great.
Always trying new foods. In terms of favorite gas station candy, actually my favorite and the best, I guess, I discovered last year in Tasmania when I was riding across Tasmania. They have these gummy snakes, but they're organic and made with real sugar, and they're like really soft. So here in the States, we have gummy candy, but it's usually like really hard to chew.
Yeah.
And I joke that like you're burning as many calories just chewing it as you are getting from the food.
Yeah.
And these gummy snakes in Tasmania were just like super soft. And I went through like 8 bags, like 1,500 calories worth of gummy snakes on this ride. And they're awesome. And I'm trying to figure out how to order them to the States.
Yes. Send them over. That's great. And then let's see, this one might, don't feel obligated to go super long on this one, but what have been a few of your favorite moments from racing or training?
Ooh, good question. Also, I mean, there's so many good memories from racing. Some that stick out are kind of the more team-oriented events. So even some of the old collegiate races, like we would do the team time trial or team relay, there's definitely something you get out of a team environment like that.
Mhm.
The gravel world championships this past September were kind of that way, where, you know, we're a crew trying to support a leader. That was really cool. I just love how racing in general just really gets the most out of you as an athlete. Like, it is unbelievable how you can pre-ride a course and say you know that a certain descent is going to be really key, and in recon you try to ride it as fast as you can to get a feel for tire pressure and bike setup and all that sort of thing, and you think you do it fast, and then in the race you just somehow do it way faster. Or even from like a power number standpoint, you know, some of the power numbers that I end up doing in a race are just so much higher than you end up doing in training. And that's just a really cool experience. There's just no replacement for racing, just in terms
Yeah.
of pushing yourself and making yourself
Yeah.
better. What was the other part of that question?
Favorite moments from racing or training. So I think you.
Oh, training. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, just long training. There's something about solo training rides that I just really love, you know, where you can really get deep in your head and just kind of explore some different mental spaces that I haven't found a way to do besides, you know, long bike rides.
Yeah. Do you ever listen to music or audiobooks, any of that stuff when you're riding?
Yeah, I do. I actually listen to music a lot.
Mhm.
And it definitely helps put you in a different headspace, but I also really make a point of doing long rides with nothing in my ears, you know, multiple times a year. I'll do a 5 or 6 hour ride and just not even take headphones with me of any kind.
Yeah.
And those are really incredible rides too, for sure.
Yeah. That's another mental training piece too.
Mhm.
All right. Last question for you. What do you think have been the pillars of your success?
Ooh, that's a big question. I think really two main things. One is a genuine love for the work and the process. I
Mhm.
know that's a pretty worn out answer probably, but it is the truth.
Mhm.
If you don't love, it doesn't mean you have to love every day, without a doubt, but just overall loving the process, loving working hard, and just kind of the discovery process too, you know, whether it's education, as an athlete, to discovering, you know, different things about yourself as an athlete, just falling in love with that. And then the second thing would just kind of be, and I alluded to this earlier, just sort of like eternal optimism. Um, and in some ways they kind of go hand in hand. Like it's, for me, it's possible to have a bad race or a bad couple of races and still quickly transition back into the training at home and really loving the training at home.
Mhm.
I don't have to be racing well to love the training. And so just sort of like defaulting back to this positive attitude and positive outlook about how lucky I am to get to do this, and really taking advantage of the periods of time where things are really clicking and you're healthy and all that sort of thing. And I just kind of try to revert back to gratitude and just how cool it is that this is what I get to do.
Yeah.
And that's really carried me through some super challenging periods, whether it's just a string of bad races or injury, illness, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Because no matter the athlete, even if it's the most successful athlete ever, you know, everyone has those ups and downs. And I think successful athletes are just good at kind of bouncing back from those downs and surfing
Definitely.
the highs.
Yes. Yeah. I feel like, I mean, more and more to the mental aspect of sports is being talked about. And especially in endurance, I feel like there's different brain in an endurance athlete that is required to be
Mm-hmm.
successful. And yeah, having that eternal optimism is such a key piece of it, instead of kind of doing the downward spiral of like, oh my God, I got another flat and the group got away,
Yeah,
and you know,
for
and
sure.
that'll
For sure.
whole thing. So I think that's great tips.
I do have genuine curiosity about the magnesium trend.
Is there more behind that question? Like, is it a specific type for what thing?
Well, I've taken magnesium in the past, but mostly just for like a sleep supplement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they're sending me uh, all of these, bits of information and research papers and articles and that sort of thing. And
Mhm.
it is really interesting. It's hard to tell whether it's one of those trend type things
Mhm.
or
Yeah.
whether it's genuinely a piece that's really lacking in most people's modern diet.
Yeah.
And so I'm just curious about it, really.
Yeah. From from my understanding in the literature I've seen and from my schooling, I remember one of the first things they taught us in my undergrad nutrition was magnesium is something that tends to be low kind of across the board in the majority of Americans' diets. And partly because we don't eat enough of the foods that it's rich in. So your
Yeah.
dark leafy greens and that kind of stuff. But then the other thing that they brought up was your dark leafy greens grown in Santa Cruz, California, and your dark leafy greens grown in upstate New York are going to have completely different magnesium
Mm,
levels in them, even though it's the same spinach, or for example, or they're both spinach. And it all has to do with the depletion of the soil
interesting.
levels. Yeah. And so it is something that, like, even in my undergrad, they were encouraging kind of leaning towards supplementation because even if we are trying to focus on the foods that are rich in it, they might actually not be that rich in it. And so there's that piece of it. But from
Hmm.
the other side of it, there are so many different types of magnesium.
Hmm.
There's magnesium oxide, there's magnesium citrate, there's bisglycinate. Um, there's several different types, and they're all of them kind of have their benefit in different areas. So magnesium malate, I memorize it because it starts with an M, but it's really great for helping with muscle soreness. And then
Mm.
magnesium citrate is actually what like hospitals might use to help someone loosen up their bowel movements.
Oh,
So
interesting. Yeah.
it's also one at a smaller dose. Some people will use it for sleep, or you'll use like a bisglycinate or a chelate for sleep. And then magnesium oxide is like really great if someone has like regular migraines. So they
Hmm.
each kind of have uh, potential areas that they perform a little bit better depending on the form. And
Hmm.
depending on the form, they'll be absorbed more or less effectively, or it's kind of like a larger molecule or a smaller molecule, or more bioavailable or less bioavailable. So that's kind of some of the extent of what I'm aware of.
Yeah,
Does any of that like link up with what they're?
for sure. Yeah, it just seems like a really key building block that has been, or at least recently, is neglected in large
Yeah,
part because of, the lack of leafy greens and the more
yeah,
natural sources for it.
yeah,
So it's interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, I was just reading through all of the different components that theoretically magnesium is key for. And it's like, wow, that's a lot of key stuff.
Yes. Yeah, it plays a big role in a lot of things, right? I mean, technically it's one of our electrolytes, and it's
Hmm.
involved in all the muscle contraction components. And so a lot of times people who will get like calf cramps at night, sometimes they'll think they're dehydrated, and they might be, but a lot of times it's magnesium
Hmm.
related. So their sodium magnesium can be out of balance. But yeah, you have to be careful too, because some people, athlete wise, like if they're using too much magnesium when they race, they'll get lower GI issues
Hmm.
because of
Yeah,
that
for sure.
loosening effect. But yes, you have to be careful with
Yeah.
it, but also it might help in certain individuals depending on where you're starting from. So
Cool.
yeah.
Yeah, I have a fun way to test that. Maybe I have the weirdest thing where whenever I get a massage, I get foot cramps. Like my
Oh,
my toes just curl like really painfully.
oh no.
And it only
Shoot.
happens like once or twice a massage, but it's every time.
Yeah.
Um, so we'll see if magnesium
Yeah.
helps with that maybe.
Supplement with some magnesium. Yeah. See how it plays off.
That's
But yeah,
funny.
so long as, I mean, there's no harm from my understanding of taking, because you'll pee out magnesium, and or you'll start noticing that you have to go to the bathroom a lot more frequently.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
then you'll know you're overloading with it. But
Hmm.
yeah, so there your body's pretty your body is so incredibly smart. Like
Yeah,
which is cool. So
yeah.
yeah, I'd be
Cool.
curious if it helps your toe situation.
Yeah, yeah. Cool. No, that's
Awesome.
great. Thanks for the
Uh,
free consultation.
Yeah. No problem. No problem. All righty. Okay. this has been really fantastic. I want to get to our 2 truths and a lie.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Mhm.
okay. So we had raced all 5 collegiate bike disciplines, mountain road, BMX, cyclocross, and what was
Track.
the track? Okay.
Mhm.
And then have played is it viola and sax?
Yeah, viola and saxophone, yeah.
Viola. And you can tell how much I know about music. Not kidding.
Uh-huh.
Never been bike packing before setting the Colorado Trail FKT.
Trying
And
to. I did not successfully set the record.
gotcha. Okay. Well, now I mean, I initially in Amanda, I thought number 1, the 5 collegiate, but which one was the lie?
It was the 5 collegiate.
Oh, all
Yeah.
right. As soon as you started
Yeah.
telling your BMX story as a kid, I was like, for sure we screwed that one up.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right.
Yeah.
Well, we got that one right. So did several disciplines, but not
I did
all
everything
5?
but BMX. So I did
Okay.
cross, mountain bike, road, and track. But BMX got added. I can't remember if it was my junior or senior year, but it just kind of felt like one too many things to
Yeah.
try in
Yeah.
combination with all the other stuff I was doing.
Yes. And what a totally different bike.
Yeah.
It's like a mini bike.
Yeah.
And then what about your viola and sax? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so that was just kind of a product of the school I went to growing up. I
Mm.
went to what's called a Waldorf school, which is a
Oh
pretty
yeah. Mhm.
arts intensive school. And music is just a big part of the curriculum. So from 3rd through 6th grade, I think I played viola, and then 6th through 9th or 10th grade, I played saxophone.
Awesome. Amazing. Well, this has been so fantastic. So many good tips in here for our listeners. Where can people find you, follow you? Where can they do that?
Yeah, so Instagram's kind of the only social channel I put effort into, but it's just my full name, Payson McElveen. I have a YouTube channel. It's not like I'm not a YouTuber by any stretch, but I put 1 to 2 kind of major videos or films there a year. And that's also just my name. And then the podcast,
Awesome.
the Adventure Stache.
Amazing. Well, we will link all those below for the listeners. And thank you again so much for your time, Payson. This has been a blast.
Yeah, thank you.